Ready to go? 5 o'clock? All right. Good evening and welcome to the Disaster Council meeting of January 27th, 2025. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Okay, when your name is called, please answer here or present. Member Hilton?
Here.
Member Mall?
Here.
Member Meyerhofer?
Here.
Member Renders?
Here.
Vice Chair Killebrew?
Here.
Chair Pagano?
Here.
For the record, all members of the Disaster Council are present.
All right, we'll move on to public comments. There will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for this public comments portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the Disaster Council and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the Disaster Council from taking action on a specific item unless it appears on the agenda. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments at this time.
Okay. We'll move forward to new business. The local hazard mitigation plan. Staff report, please.
Mayor Pagano, Disaster Council members. My name is Lawrence Meyerhofer. I am the Emergency Services Coordinator as of last May 2024 in Dana Point. The local hazard mitigation plan has been in the works for the last, since like 2021, I believe, when the city applied for the grant. And I have a short presentation here. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah.
It's not short, but I'm going to rip through these slides real quick, and if you guys have any questions, in the end we can discuss them. So what brings us to this point? Why did we develop this plan? Well, the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 is the reason. The things I'll cover in this quick presentation is the act itself, the development process of the mitigation plan, the contents within it, the review and approval process that we went through, the council resolution for adoption that we're here to discuss and hopefully move on to city council as required by Cal OES and FEMA. So what is emergency management? Cal, I think that was a question in the city council last week, but there's 4 phases. Mitigation preparedness is obviously before the event occurs, and then you have the response and the recovery. A lot of things go into preparedness, but we are here today to discuss the mitigation issue, and that is very much related to preparedness in itself. So the Disaster Act of 2000, that was a federal law that federal government wanted to make a more efficient way for local, county, state, special jurisdictions to mitigate hazards. It was obviously more efficient to prevent or help lessen the damages from a disaster than it is after the fact to repair everything like Pacific Palisades is going through. So what are the requirements? So as I said, it required every state and local government to create a hazard mitigation plan. Requires state to have a mitigation plan to receive disaster assistance. Mainly that's for the grant opportunities. There's pre-disaster and post-disaster hazard mitigation grant money available every year. There's a lot of money in it. But if you don't have a plan, you don't even get to apply. However, which is interesting, they made one exception, and that was to provide funding for cities or states or local governments if they want to develop a plan. So that's how we got the federal government to approve this document, 75% of the funding. We had to come up with the other 25, but I'll go through that more. And then it requires the president to create a federal interagency task force to coordinate disaster mitigation programs. That's basically the funding mechanism, forcing an agency in the federal government to how they're going to distribute and administer the money, and that's the part of every city, local, state, and county jurisdiction needs to have a plan first to lay out what they have in mind and what they want to spend the money on. So I talked a little bit already about the benefits, pre-disaster planning. It forces local agencies to plan ahead of time, qualifies for the city for pre and post disaster mitigation grant funding, where there is hundreds of millions of dollars every year. It's very competitive. We're competing against all the other cities, counties, and states, but it is possible to get them in. It identifies city mitigation programs, projects, and strategies that the city has in place, assists in reducing disaster impacts, and increases cost effectiveness. So like I said, I believe in 2021, the city of Dana Point probably applied for the federal grant money to develop a local hazard mitigation plan, and in October 7, 2022, they were actually awarded it. I believe the amount of money to develop the plan was like $90,000. We had to come up with 20, so they paid 7. Not a bad deal. We went through a competitive bid process, and the professional services agreement with Jacob Green and Associates was established on February 7, 2023 to lead the development. And the biggest part, one of the biggest parts, is the working group, and I'll talk a little bit about that. That's the hazard mitigation working group that the feds are really sticklers on for all local agencies that want to develop a plan. They want to see community involvement. So it consisted of 37 representatives that were part of the working group. Department representatives, obviously, local and regional agencies like the county, water agencies, wastewater, SDG&E, Southern California Edison, residents, and also business leaders we asked to join us in the development of this plan. So what did the working group do besides assist in developing the plan? They had to reach out to the public to ask for their input. They did it through organized outreach events, resident surveys, community outreach presentations, an open house, city website, flyers, and they even put an article in the Dana Point Times. It was basically asking residents what they're concerned about, like surveys. I'm sure people down on Beach Road there probably want to know about a tsunami, whereas people near the wildfire urban interface want to know about wildfire safety. People in the flood zone paying flood insurance, they probably want to know more about flood hazard in the city. So outreach is a big part of it. So what's in this 125 pages of document? There's basically a community profile, a hazard assessment, a threat and vulnerability hazard assessment, the hazard mitigation strategy, which is the heart of it. What do we do? What programs do we have that count as mitigation? And then what's the requirement once you commit to this? What's the planned maintenance? So community profile is just the geography and environment. What's the city made up of? You're a coastal city. The demographics, the economy and patterns, the land use, the development and trends, infrastructure assessment. It's like it's mainly a residential area. It's not industrial so much. It's a tourist area. 33,000 people. 6.5 square miles, not too big. Yeah, that's, and the infrastructure. We have a few fire stations, one police station at City Hall. We have a wastewater treatment plant. And some schools. Schools are a big one too. Some other critical infrastructure as well. They identified 5 natural hazards and 2 human-caused hazards. These are consistent with the city's general safety element of the general plan, which is important. I'll talk about that later. But earthquakes, floods, wildfires, tsunami, severe weather, windstorms, rain, and then the 2 human-caused. We have a lot of hazmat spills that I'm sure OCFA responds to. I believe we average 10 a year, probably small ones. And then we have the San Onofre nuclear power plant. So we had to put that in there, obviously. We get a lot of grant money. every year, almost 170,000 we got last year from Southern California Edison, and that's in an MOU agreement with Songs. So it's important that we recognize that, obviously. They still have spent nuclear fuel rods there. I know it's decommissioned, it's not as risky, but hey, look what happened in Fukushima, you just never know what could happen. So what's the threat and vulnerability assessment? Basically, what are the physical risks? Physical risks from an earthquake, buildings can fall on people, wildfires, if you live in the wildfire urban area, evacuation's a big one. Vulnerable populations, if you have a lot of elderly, if you have assisted living facilities, if you have hospitals, how are they impacted from these different hazards? Not to pick on you, with the wildfires being on everybody's mind. If you watch TV that night, how they were evacuating that hospital, I was like, wow. I've read about it. I've wrote about it, but I've never seen it. We always said we were going to do this with the city of LA. Oh, we got to take care of the vulnerable populations. You know, we got to evacuate the assisted living centers, because in Hurricane Katrina, those are all that got left behind. The lessons learned from Katrina. So those are tough spots, but they had it going. They had buses pulling up, ambulances. They got them out of there that night in Altadena area, I believe. But vulnerable populations is a big issue. For Dana Point, not sure. I don't think we have a lot of assisted living facilities. Do we?
Just have
a few?
Yeah, we have one large one, the Sea Bluff, fountains at Sea Bluff.
We have one down south on Belmar.
Yeah.
No hospitals, though. Major hospitals. We have what do you call it?
Urgent care?
Urgent cares. We have a few urgent cares, but no major hospitals. Closest one, I believe, is Laguna.
Yes.
Mission Laguna, Mission Viejo.
So vulnerable populations, facility and infrastructure. That's another. That's another one that is related to like hospitals, but facility and infrastructure. Fire stations. Are they in the wildfire area? Are they in the flood zone? Are they built to the latest earthquake building standards? Police stations, that's another critical facility. City Hall, community center that would be used as a, with Red Cross as a mass shelter. We only have 3 critical facilities really in Dana Point. Well, 3 city government facilities, City Hall, community center, and the nature reserve. So those are 3 areas.
The mayor's house.
The mayor's house. We have the school too. Schools are also identified. So they have identified in this plan a map with all these critical infrastructure and what's at risk and where, if they're falling into any of those threatened areas with the different hazards. And then land use and population pattern, we talked about that. Is it a residential area, an industrial, a commercial? It's mainly tourism. It's mainly residential. Then some of you will say, what's climate change got to do with it? Well, the state requires it, but we have to do it to comply. However, climate change is, how does it affect those hazards? It doesn't affect really an earthquake. It doesn't really affect a tsunami. However, it would affect probably floods and rainstorms, more severe, wildfires, windstorms. So that's kind of where they're going with that. And then what's our strategy? What else is in this plan? Basically, it's a capabilities assessment. So we identified all of our existing programs that categorize into mitigation, and then what hazard mitigations action will we take on top of that? A lot of them are, we'll continue with these programs. We'll continue to revise emergency plans. We'll continue to provide and participate in Tri-City RACES programs, have first aid every year. So as you can see, they break them down in the plan to planning and regulatory, administrative and technical, financial, and education and outreach. But you can see planning and regulatory, it's like what kind of plans? We have building codes, community development with Brenda, she does all this. So you have building codes, we have a CIP plan, we have an EOP, emergency operations plan, that identifies all these things and how we're gonna respond to that and how we're gonna react. We have a general plan, a strategic plan, we have zoning codes. Do we build in the brush fire areas? Do we build in the flood zones? Do we make them build up their foundation elevation? Things like that. And then we are tsunami and storm ready certified by NOAA, so that's a good thing. That means, what does that mean? That means we have a plan, we have signage, and we have evacuation routes pre-identified, and we've done a community outreach and education to all those living in the inundation zone along the coast. Administrative and technical, we have the working group now. We're gonna keep that group together. We have to meet once a year to keep this in compliance. We have CERT races, we have programs in public works that Matt deals with, probably storm drain clearance, sandbags, things like that. We have police services, fire services, obviously. They have a lot of mitigation programs in place. Community development with Brenda and all the zoning codes and building code requirements when we have construction. I sit in on monthly SONGS, San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, Interjurisdictional Planning Committee meeting. It's important because we get money from them every year, or from SCE. SCE is running the decommissioning down there. So I go to those meetings. They have exercises every year. They do a lot of radiological testing and have a whole group that does that. So it's important. We get those power safety, power shutoff announcements from SDG&E. We work with 3 different water districts. We work with OSEMO, which is Orange County Emergency Management Organization. The county sheriff's county brings all cities to monthly meetings. They discuss how they're gonna work with Alert OC, to how they're gonna activate the county EOC whenever the local EOC activates, and how we work together, how we communicate with the ham radio that we have with OA1. And then we obviously work with Cal OSHA and FEMA. We're SIMS, NIMS compliant, which is the state OES requirement, FEMA requirement. There's financial mitigation measures, CIP, how we fund these programs. Well, CIP, hopefully in the future, the FEMA Homeland Hazard Mitigation Program. Hopefully we get a lot of money from them in the future, now that we have a plan and can apply. And then like I talked about, we get the SONGS MOU funding every year. And then education and outreach. We have 2 major community programs, CERT, which is Community Emergency Response Team. It's a 17-hour, 7-day course that we teach to the public. We were a Tri-City CERT, and we're gonna be revisiting that. We host the RACES meeting every month. We participate in the Great Shakeout program every year. September's Emergency Preparedness Month, we participate with that. We do first aid and CPR. We have a disaster service worker program. Every city employee is a disaster service worker. They have training. They go through FEMA IS training. They also go through our EOC orientation training. We do quarterly exercises, and hopefully we're going to do an annual functional exercise of the EOC. Trying to wrap up here, guys. Stay with me. The plan's good for 5 years. So in 2030, we're gonna have to revise it again. So it's required to be revised, and it'll be reviewed again by FEMA in 5 years. The working group's gotta meet annually to kind of discuss where we're at. Did we meet our mitigation obligations? Are we out of certain programs? Are we still in them? We have to go through that with them once a year at meeting. What was the review process? It's a pretty rigorous process. We posted it, I believe, in last October for 2 weeks for public review and comment. Then it went to Cal OES for a 45-day review and approval, and they approved that November 22nd, 2024. Then it went to FEMA for 45 days, and they approved it pending council adoption. So we got to get that resolution to council, or they won't recognize it. It was a 15-page review tool. It was not easy. They came back to us once. However, we came back to them, answered their questions about the planning process. We didn't have to do any revisions to the plan, just answered questions on how did you do outreach, what page was this on, and they approved it our second go round with OES, and then FEMA didn't ask any questions. Once OES approves it, usually FEMA will approve it, and then they did, pending city council adoption. So next week, we hope we get a vote of approval to move to city council at the February 4th meeting. One thing in the resolution you'll see, it's what's called State Assembly Bill 2140. That bill recommends that you state in there that you commit to putting the LHMP in the safety element of the general plan. Community Development's general plan has a safety element. They want us to refer to it, link to it. They want the two to be consistent. If you do that, the state says they'll fund 18.5% of that 25%. All we have to do is come up with 6.5% now for a project. So you get $1 million grant, you only got to pay us $65,000. It's not that easy, but that would be the math. And that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you for that. Discussion with the committee. You guys see staff's recommended action. I just wanted to, anybody has any questions for discussion or any motions?
Could I ask a question? On the mitigation actions section, so page 105 through 112, you've got responsible parties. What's the plan to make sure that they know they're responsible for that, and any kind of deadlines for completing their task? Is there a project plan put together, or will there be one? Because there's actions that have to be taken to be in compliance, and I would think that before like the annual meeting, this might be a focus area.
Yeah, like I said, the working group has to meet annually, but they are going to review at that end of the year, next year when we have this, what mitigation actions have been taken and which haven't. So I agree with you, we're probably gonna have to go through that plan and let them know ahead of time, hey, there's a mitigation action you're responsible for. And I can do that, I can.
And I think some are ongoing, like, you know,
Yeah.
the deployment of fiber optic, it says 1 to 5 years. We know city side is moving through with fiber, and so some of these projects are underway or ongoing, in addition to some new efforts that we'll probably take on.
I just want to make sure that the responsible party is aware of it, focused, and you're following up with them to make sure that their responsibilities being adhered to.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Question for you, when it talks about critical facilities infrastructure, one thing I noticed, when we talk about schools, it only lists 3 schools. It omits any of the private schools, like St. Edward's isn't on there. Is that something that be updated as we review this every year?
Absolutely, we can make a note of that. Yeah, they want this to be a living document. Like I said, every 5 years, it's a mandate that they want you to meet every year and kind of add to it, update it as you go. So definitely we can look into that. That's a good question.
Is the working group the 37 people that were part of this?
Yes. Not all of them show up, but we invite them all, we ask them to gather, and that's my understanding, is that they came together in the development.
Yeah, I mean, I anticipate that it will probably be a staff working group that's really driving what efforts are forward, and as much as we can get participation from outside parties, we'll do that, especially if they're partners like the water districts or, you know, SDG&E, where we absolutely, or OCFA, or, you know, where it's absolutely critical that we have them, but, you know, otherwise, I think, you know, we'll probably drive it forward.
Any other discussion, questions? Somebody want to be so brave and make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right. Motion, sir, is to, with the staff's recommended action?
Yes.
Second?
I will second.
Right. All those in favor? Aye. All right, that passes. Is there any, let's go around the room. Start with you, Captain Hilton, and work around. Anything anybody needs to report?
I have nothing to report.
I do, just wanted to mention what's in store for the disaster council in the future. Administrative ordinance requires that we meet minimally once every year. However, any time a meeting can be called by the chair or the vice chair. We have some other plans that are a little dated that are in the mix. One's the continuity of operations, continuity of government plan. We're probably gonna come back to the disaster council once we have that complete, so that the city council can ratify that as well. So any plans that gotta go to before a full city council has to come through the disaster council. That's what the ordinance says. So when that plan's complete, we'll let you know, and then we can meet again. The city's emergency operation plan, that, the last time that was updated was 2021 as well, so it needs to be updated. It also needs to mention the LHMP, but we have a few more areas like continuity of government that have changed. And then we have a few emergency action plans that the water district have sent, one that has sent me on the Palisades Dam. Basically, the federal government or the state government's required all water districts to provide dam failure plans. So they give you maps of where the water's going, when it'll be coming down the hill to your area, and, your time that you can have to evacuate, and the flood areas that it's gonna go to. So Trampus is already in the EOP. I think it was added in 2021. Palisades was sent to us last year, and Chief Hilton showed me that as well, and we updated our contact information, let them know my number for a 24-hour call if something happens. So that's the emergency operations plan. Then the last plan, that when that's done, the emergency operations plan will come to you as well. And then the last plan is the facilities and safety plan. So I'm working with Steve, reconvening the safety meeting with them, which consists of the department representatives, talk about issues within their department, community development, public works, police, services, and we had some issues with they brought up. So it's required by the state law. Cal OSHA requires that. So we're updating that plan as well. It hasn't been updated since 2021 or 2022. And it's got some dated information that needs to be revised.
Thank you for that. Over.
Thanks, Larry, for catching up with all this stuff. There's a lot. Really appreciate it.
No
Adam?
update?
No update. All right, well, with that, I will adjourn. I don't have a date for the next disaster council meeting. Do we have that tentatively on the calendar?
It really will depend on when the plans are ready, then we'll work with the disaster council to set a date
Okay.
and bring those plans to you.
With that, we are adjourned.